and one for the unhoused. So those are the topics that we'll be focusing on through the year. And in a twist, we're going to have our lunch and learns not only here on a monthly basis, but we'll be taking it on the road to campuses, to congregations, to civic groups. So if you have any organizations that you think would like to partner with us, we'd love to be able to do that. Also on your table, there, if you haven't registered, you have a sign-in form which says that you'd like to get involved in the commission, you'd like to get more information from. And we have some upcoming events. The next Lunch and Learn is on March 15th, Friday, March 15th here, maybe down in the downstairs meeting hall. But we'll know for sure soon. You'll get a message about the topic and more details. Also, on the back, you'll see that there's a concert coming up, and we hope you all come. It's a if you came to the one last year, it was totally fun, but in a different way. This one is more participatory. It's going to be a sing-along of the 70s music with a full 20-piece orchestra, and we're inviting you to bring your friends too. And so we've got flyers in the back, and we'd love for you to come. Throughout the year, we're going to be hosting the film festival again, the LA International Short Film Festival, and we'll have some more heady topics with a larger audience and maybe a panel conversation. The first one we're working on finalizing will be on mental health in the criminal justice system. So we have a full calendar. You can check online. We'll be posting events there, but we'll also be sending emails. And to the point of, please register yourself with your email so we have it. But if you know people who might want to join, either forward our flyers or to send us their names. We're really eager to grow the community, the audiences that we have. So I want to, again, I want to thank you for coming, and I want to invite Sherry Purcell up to introduce our speaker and to chat a little bit more about our organization.
Thank you, Ms. Pam. Stand just so I can see you, but too short. So I'm Sherry Purcell. I'm the president of the Immaculate Heart community, and on behalf of the community, I welcome you here today. I always like to identify our members who are here and who are on Zoom so you can get to know us. So will the members just raise your hand, wave your hand so we all know where you are. Thank you. One of our goals with these Lunch and Learn series is to implement part of our goal statement, which calls for us to build relations in society which foster access for all people to truth, dignity, and full human development, and to strategically change practices and situations which impede such access. So meeting regularly in these Lunch and Learn events every month gives us the opportunity to form those relationships and partnerships with people like you. So thank you for being here. If you're here for the first time, please raise your hand. Let us see who you are. Yay! Thank you for coming. Everybody else, thanks for coming back. We have some groupies here that come every month, pretty much. So thanks for being here. I also want to acknowledge that Stephen Victor is here. Stephen, give us a wave. Stephen was our speaker at a Lunch and Learn in October, and he talked to us about the housing crisis, homelessness, and mental health. So, and PATH and Hollywood Forward. So, Steve, thanks for being back today. I know you came for the sandwiches. So. So today we have the distinct pleasure of welcoming Canon Suzanne Edwards-Acton, who is co-chair of the program group on Black ministry for the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles, and we're in the Episcopal Center, so we're really glad that you're here with us today, Suzanne. She's a past vice president of the H. Belfield Hannibal chapter of the Union of Black Episcopalians. She hosts various podcasts, and she's the founder of My Work to Do, which is described as a program designed as a space for white people, not a small task, to build stamina for conversations on race. She holds a BA from UC San Diego, a master from LMU, and a master's degree in pastoral ministry from the Seminary of the Southwest. Today, she's going to be talking to us about anti-racism as spiritual practice. Now, that's a topic that lights us up at the Immaculate Heart community because, as Pam mentioned, we have a lot of commissions, but we have a commission that we call Anti-Racism as Spiritual Transformation. So there's some common theme going on here, right? So a little bit of background on that. When we were forming the commission after the murder of George Floyd, we were educating ourselves about white supremacy, white fragility, systemic racism, and its insidious and pervasive nature in all aspects of our society. And most of us who were white understood that in order to overcome the depth of the destruction caused by these systems, it was going to take a true transformation of ourselves and our society before Black people and other people who are not white could be truly free. And we could see that the pursuit of a spiritual path was really the only way to go to rid our systems of the cancer on society, the only way that this cancer on our society and our systems could be eradicated was through faith. We need to turn to God for direction and guidance, to redirect our behaviors, and help us to really know that we are all one. So all those years ago, we wanted to punctuate those understandings by adding spiritual transformation to the name of our commission. So it was not just Commission on Anti-Racism, we named it the Commission on Anti-Racism as Spiritual Transformation. So we welcome the alignment today with what Suzanne's going to talk about. So as you know, if you've been here before, that we in the Immaculate Heart community focus our work on 3 different steps: education, prayer, and action. So education is about what we're about today in the Lunch and Learn. Prayer, our members hold these issues that we're talking about at our Lunch and Learn and through our commissions. We hold those issues in our prayers, and we ask you to do the same thing according to your own faith and tradition. In terms of action, at all of these events, we ask you to listen for ways that you can act based on what you're hearing today. So listen for 1 or 2 things, no matter how small, that you might be able to do to make a difference, to raise awareness or advance this issue. So we hope we see you at our monthly Lunch and Learns in 2024. Check out our website, get on our mailing list. If you have an interest in being a member, let us know that too. We take new members annually. And so thank you for being here. And please join me in welcoming Canon Suzanne Edwards-Acton.
Start, I have this is to help get a ballot measure on the ballot, and I'm just gonna pass it around. Some people are kind of looking to sign this, and other people are like, I don't know what it is, I don't want to sign it, so feel free to not sign it, but I just want to put it out. We have another one on the back table, and it has to do with homelessness services. And so, and my day job is I am the Chief Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Officer for the people concerned. And so my partner from TAP is here. And so this is just so if you're wondering, well, what is it? It's about the fact that we have right now a quarter, that the Measure H funds are going to go away. Because they were never intended to be, they're not structured to be always there, permanent. So what this is it's proposing that it's a 0.25% tax. They're trying to move it to 0.5%. And some people are like, oh my God, more money, but it would be the equivalent of about $60 to $90 a year. For people who are low income to middle income, it would be approximately that per year, the difference. But part of what they're trying to do is to make it permanent. So that is one of the big pieces of this, is that it's not going to be like, oh, okay, in a couple of years it's gone again. Because without that, we have a crisis around that. So I'm just passing this around. If you want to sign it, do. If you don't need to. Sorry. There it is. Okay. So I'm gonna just, yeah. And register to vote. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. LA County and register to vote. So I'm gonna just jump right in. I see some people here who know me. I'm not always the most organized person, although when I talk about what I talk about, there's always a lot of structure. So I'm just gonna start with these things that I have to share here. Spiritual bypassing, I bring this up right at the very beginning because oftentimes in faith communities in particular, we have a habit of using spiritual bypassing when we're talking about things like race. Because it helps to say, like, it's okay, God wouldn't give you more than you can handle, and sort of takes that off. Right now we're not going to really talk about that deeply because you're going to be all right. God's going to make sure that you're taken care of. And it actually is much more complex than that. I don't disbelieve that to be true, but it is a tactic that sometimes we don't even realize we're doing, but it dismisses things. So it might say like, well, I know that the racism thing it's real, but it's all okay. Just let's pray about it. And that is true. But it is more complex. We need to be doing more than just praying about it. So I appreciate your introduction. So these are just some thoughts on spiritual bypassing. You're going to receive all of these things. Can that be true? Yes. Okay, good. Because I'm just moving through a whole bunch of information because I don't really know who's in the room. I don't know where you are in your journey around this. So this came from a conversation with Pam when Pam asked me to go to a luncheon. I had been at the table with some of you at a luncheon and I wasn't able to go. But as we were talking, and I don't know what we were even talking about that led to this conversation, but I know that Mary and Bob know me well enough to know that I talk about and observe everywhere I go race and racism. And I think that's rooted in the fact that I am a light-skinned Black girl who was raised in a Black neighborhood to the age of 10, actually 9, the year that's where my parents had been redlined. I did not know that at the time. So we moved to La Palma, an all-white neighborhood. We were one of 7 families. It's the part of Orange County right up against Cerritos and Long Beach. And my life drastically changed. And I didn't really understand what just happened to me, but something just happened. I don't understand there's a whole cultural thing going on. And I know that I am Black, but a whole bunch of people here don't know that I'm Black, but I don't really look like them because my hair is different and the ways are different. And so I didn't know. And I now understand that it's a little bit of like trauma kind of was happening. But I'm Episcopalian. My mom was raised at St. Thomas Episcopal Church in Philadelphia. If anyone knows that, that's where Absalom Jones's ashes are. So I come from a long history of Episcopalians, but in Black church Episcopalians. And that means something really significant because you couldn't be in the Episcopal church and be Black. You couldn't go to any church you wanted to go to. I don't know if that's true in other faith backgrounds, but I think it is. There were certain churches we could go to. And so my mom and dad met at Howard University, one of the HBCUs. And that's all significant because since I am fair, some people were like, but you're not really Black. And I didn't have any other story. I did not understand that my parents were redlined. I didn't know these things, but I was watching them everywhere. And so that transition at the age of 9 was really, really significant for me in ways that like it took me a while till I understood what had happened. I used to think I was crazy because very few people would talk to me about this. But I now look at it as a huge gift. It's a huge gift. And talking about like helping white people to build stamina for conversations around race. I feel like that was part of like what that was for me. I was raised around a lot of white people. I have a lot of white people in my life who I love. And I really say that in all seriousness. And I think that's significant because first, there was a lot of white people I did not like at all because they would say things to me. When I was 13, the girl says, "Wait, why are you so dark?" I've been in the summer, I get way darker. There's lots of melanin in here. And she said, "Why are you so dark?" And I don't know, I'm tan. And she said, "N-word." She walked away from me. But that was when I was 13 and I was at the student store at the junior high. And everybody around me was white. They were all like, we all just stood there. No one knew. I didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. Right. So now I go back to all of those experiences and I say that was a gift for me because that was a really significant moment and I can use it to help drive some of the work that I'm doing. So spiritual bypassing, if someone had told me just pray about it on that day, that would not have been helpful for me. It wouldn't have been helpful to hear that, you know, maybe God has a plan for you and all of this. And that's what spiritual bypassing does. It allows people to dismiss things that are very, very real. And so I will share these, we will be receiving all of these, but this is just some context. It actually is a form of violence. And this is an article that talks about it, gives more context. This conversation that I had, so I'm going to go back now and say that the conversation that Pam and I were having, I wandered into saying some of the things that I always say, like I said, Owen, Mary, and Bob Noah, saying some of the things I always say, which has to do with race and racism, and always thinking about that, and wondering about that, and talking about that, and it comes up in pretty much every conversation that I have somehow or another. I talk about where I see it and where I see it in systems and all the things, right? And I know that I really hold that it is a spiritual practice to hold this all the time, but I actually think I'm glad I'm with all of you because this document that's on the screen, there's not enough for everyone to have one, but maybe one for the table. And again, you'll have them, but it's sometimes easier to see, right? If you can have it and just sort of scan it. Yeah, having this, looking introspectively and what's going on and looking at that from the perspective of a spiritual practice is what we started talking about somehow. And Pam said, "Oh, I think I'd like for you to come and speak with our group." Is that what you remember? Because that's what I remember, yeah. And I don't even remember what we were talking about, but I know that that's what it is, that this is a journey that we have to be on. I think it's a spiritual imperative. I think that we're in danger, like spiritual danger, without looking at this as human cruelty on a massive level. And then like just kind of living as if it isn't, is actually dangerous. So on many levels. So this middle piece of this document says, why do we go along with what we are socially taught? We know what it feels like to be isolated and we are scared of what we don't know. I think that's deeply connected to this whole thing. And again, I don't know you, I don't know where you are, and I don't know what your socialization has been, but there's the beginning. We're born into a world that has mechanics already in place. Things are already going on all around us. And if you're a person of color, you're gonna see it pretty earlier on. And if you're white, you may or may not see it, depending on what your environment is. But we are all going to experience it, and we're all going to experience it differently. And being people of color, so here in the United States, I'm really talking about here in the United States, because I know the structures exist everywhere, but they're different everywhere. Our structure is white supremacy culture. We are built on that. It's a foundation. It's literally what the United States, like America, not the land, but the actual structure that we operate on as a country, because the land and the people who were already here existed before the structure. But the structure that we're founded on is white supremacy culture, right? So there's a beginning, we come into it, and some of us are completely unaware, all of us are completely unaware at the beginning, but as we move along, we're taught all kinds of different things by the structure. Only we don't really talk about the fact that the structure is there. That's one of the pieces of the structure, is that the structure is very strong, but we never talk about it. That's why it's dangerous that in Florida right now, you can't teach Black history. I don't really care what the history is, but you really can't teach the true history of our country. There's a whole bunch of pieces that we can't teach. So anyway, so we're all socialized, and all of these different things are going on all around us that are giving us rewards, and they're giving us sort of like punishments like that. And then nobody really actually talks about that because that's part of the movement. Okay, so we have the structure, and all of this is going on. We have our first socialization. These are like, they're like, what's the word? These are like theoretical. People who study this, that's what's happening, you know, for all of us. We have our first socialization. We touch up against this thing and we see it, and what happens when we see it is really important. You may or may not even be able to think about when you were younger and what happened when certain key things happen. Then there's institutional and cultural enforcement and all of it. So you can take a look at that, but I think that middle question is really important. Why do we go along with what we are socially taught? So that has a lot to do with all of this. This is the way that oppression works. So we'll start here in the middle. I'm sorry, we'll start up here on the, right over here. There's systemic mistreatment of a particular group. This is the non-target group, the group that is not being oppressed. This systemic mistreatment, I love to use the image of potholes in Los Angeles. And some of you know, and some of you don't know, but if you know, you know. In certain neighborhoods, potholes get filled. We have that much money to pay for potholes to be filled. And we would think that each neighborhood gets their share, and it would be equal shares. It is absolutely not. This, some neighborhoods get this, and other neighborhoods get this. So the target group, the systemic mistreatment is happening over here. It is happening. There is systemic mistreatment happening. So that's one of the things that the foundation doesn't want for us to talk about, that these are systemic things, right, that are happening. They're not like, oh, shoot, just me and that neighbor don't get along. It's like big things that are going on. And then it generates misinformation, ignorance, all these things are happening, right? And then we're thinking this makes sense. Everybody's potholes gets filled. Mine get filled, so don't yours, of course, yours get filled. I don't even think about the fact that yours don't get filled because mine do. So of course, that justification creates further mistreatment, but still the group doesn't even know the other potholes aren't being filled. You like literally don't know that the thing is happening. That's why they're not teaching history in Florida right now. That is why they are literally taking textbooks, right? Target resistance, isolation happens where the potholes are happening. People are, you know, going to the city hall, getting all loud, doing all the things, breaking, you know, falling apart themselves internally. And that then starts to make me think that really maybe it's true about me because I think I'm crazy, which I thought when I was 9. And then that becomes, and because I think I'm crazy, then everybody around me starts to think I'm crazy. And that leads to more mistreatment, right? And that has to do with a lot of people who are unhoused right now. If we look at that as systemic stuff is going on, and we are all saying that it's because these people who are on the streets, they have all of these issues, but really the issue is bigger than just the issues. So I need to ask about this. I'm going to show you a video. Maybe you've seen it because you actually just almost referred verbatim to this. But I want to ask you about this. Can I just start the video? Will that be okay? So.
Children's Hospital Los Angeles is consistently recognized as having a commitment to excellence
I will start over.
and innovation. Children's Hospital Los Angeles has served generations of families in California by being a place of healing
But there are also
and hope.
questions about what we can do as individuals to recognize our own inherent racism and to work to change that. As part of our Race Matters series, we have for racism constantly anti-racist. Ibram X. Kendi, author of Be an Anti-Racist. He's a professor of history and economy at the Boston University Center for Anti-Racist Research. Robin DiAngelo is the author of the book White Fragility, and as a consultant and educator, racial and social justice issues.
racism in America.
So welcome to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Policy and governmental
Creating this one now.
it's about what we can do as individuals
So
to
we
recognize our own
you
inherent racism and to
look,
work to change that.
but in your working
Race Matters series, I'm going to
and
here with two scholars to explore racism in America and the concept of anti-racism. Edwards-Acton is the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, and he's a professor of history and the founding director of Boston University Center for Anti-Racist Research. Is the author of
Anti-racist policies
and is a consultant and
equity
educator on
and
racial
justice,
social
people
justice.
who are expressing those types of ideas and supporting those types of policies. In those moments, there could be anti-racist. And part of being anti-racist is having the willingness to admit the times when you're being racist, while to be not racist. So if you say, even after you have said something that's racist, I'm not racist.
So just to clarify,
Someone who is expressing an anti-racist idea or supporting an anti-racist policy with their action. No, anti-racist idea. So I urge you to become anti-racist. I urge you to be anti-racist. In many ways, being anti-racist is almost like overcoming an addiction. The first problem is becoming an addiction. It's first admitting that you have an addiction to racism. And then secondly, spending every day of your life ensuring that you're no longer going back to that, ensuring that you're being anti-racist.
So Robert, let's talk about fighting for justice.
Even after we just said something that's racist, I'm not racist.
So just to clarify,
The answer to that is connected to what you just said. Not breaking
you're always
and one of the challenges is that we've been taught to think about racism as only occurring in individual moments perpetrated by individual people who consciously and intentionally mean to harm other people. And as long as we think that way, we have to fight. It's not going to see stuff as complicit. When you understand that it's actually that it's infused across society, that changes the question from if you are or are not racist to how and either upholding or challenging race. But that denial is incredibly defensive. And the defensiveness functions to repel any challenge to
breaking denial.
So we're
one of the challenges is
our inability to
about
stand
racism as only occurring in individual moments perpetrated by individual people who consciously and intentionally mean to harm other people. And as long as we define it that way, the average white person is not going to see themselves as complicit. When you understand that it's actually the system that we're in, that it's infused across the society, that changes your question from if you are or are not racist to how am I either upholding or challenging racism. But that denial sets us up to be incredibly defensive, and the defensiveness functions to repel any challenge to our complicity. So we're fragile in our inability to withstand those challenges.
It's fair to say there's been a surge of interest in both of your writings in recent weeks for certain. Do you think that surge of interest means that people are more willing to consider these ideas, to reflect in a way that they haven't before?
Certainly, there's an openness, there's a sense of urgency. It's very clear that this idea that we are post-racial has been stripped away. And if we don't put support around us to keep our attention on this, we will inevitably slip back into comfort with the status quo. Let me just say it. The racist status quo is comfortable for white people. I moved through a society in which racism is the norm, not an aberration.
Ibram, you're very specific in your language about the need to address racist policies and racist institutions. But I think a lot of people are wondering on the grassroots molecular level, what does that mean? How can I be anti-racist in my everyday interactions?
So I think you have people who are reading our work and who are policymakers. and can recognize they have the power to change policy within their neighborhoods, within their institutions. Then you also have people who manage policies, as they're almost like middle managers, and they can thwart policies that they know to be racist. And then you have every single one of us who can join local organizations that are challenging racist policy. We can fund local organizations and centers that are uncovering and challenging racist policies. We can figure out ways to contribute to that local movement for anti-racist policies. Every single one of us has something to give, and I think we need to figure out what we're going to give to this larger movement.
Robin, I wanted to ask you, I've talked to a lot of people who, white people in particular, who in this moment say, you know, I'm not racist, but I'll tell you one thing, I am not going to be made to feel guilty for being white.
Well, the first thing I would ask someone, a white person who lives their life in segregation, which most white people do, is how do you know that you are not racist? One, that is never put to the test. That if you don't have any accountability, how can you be so confident about that? You know, again, it's not a comfortable examination, but I am clear that as a result of having been raised in this society, that I have internalized racist ideologies and biases, and that I do act on those in various ways. I don't feel guilty about that. I didn't choose that socialization. What I feel is responsible for the outcome.
Ibram, it's worth pointing out that as you were writing this book, you yourself were diagnosed with a very serious, very late stage cancer. How did that inform how you did the work? And you also draw the parallel between cancer and racism in America.
When we diagnose individuals as being racist, they typically hurt really badly, and they typically view us as attacking them, attacking who they are. By contrast, when I was diagnosed as having stage 4 colon cancer, you know, it was devastating to hear, but I didn't view that doctor as seeking to attack me, or I didn't view that doctor as seeking to hurt me. I actually viewed that doctor as seeking to help me. And so I think that's the first parallel for us to realize when you're being diagnosed as racist, the purpose is to help. And then when we think about the way in which we go about treating cancer, particularly metastatic cancer, that's how we can treat metastatic racism, particularly within a society. And so there's typically a local treatment in which doctors go in and surgically remove the tumors in the way we can go in and surgically remove racist policies. And doctors do a systemic treatment in which they flood the body with the chemotherapy, which is equivalent to flooding the body with anti-racist policies that have been proven to reduce racial inequity. But I think it's critically important for us to recognize that this nation has metastatic racism. And in order for us as a country to be healed, there's going to be pain. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of pain. But we recognize, like when we go through the pain of healing from a serious illness, that there is joy, that there is equity on the other side.
A lot of work to be done, and hopefully joy ahead, Ben. That is Ibram Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, and Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna now, if you can take a piece of paper, any piece of paper, turn it over and number 1 to 4. If you're taking notes on something, just number 1 to 4, it's for you. We're gonna just do a little activity.
Next, after this activity. Okay.
So what we're doing is we're gonna number this paper from 1 to 4. It's for you. We're going to look at this little video. It's about 3 minutes long. And during that, they're gonna talk about oppression, like how it works, okay? And they're gonna tell you 4 different ways. And at the beginning, they're gonna say it, and they're gonna say it fast, and they're gonna be like, oh wait, I missed it. But they're gonna repeat multiple times, okay? And then we're gonna use that information. for as we move ahead. So they're gonna just number from 1 to 4 and write down the 4 ways that it works, okay? Number the paper from 1 to 4. And you're gonna write the 4 things down. But again, they're gonna say it multiple times, so don't be stressed out. I promise you, you'll get it by the end.
Okay, let's play it at the same time. Okay.
There are 4. Oppression is a word that's often used as a blanket.
Oppression. It's a word that's often used as a blanket term, but there's actually a whole lot more to it. There are 4 interlocking aspects of oppression.
Okay.
Ideological, institutional.
As a blanket term, but there's actually a whole lot more to it. There are 4 interlocking aspects of oppression: ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. And it might seem like a small difference, but it's very important to be able to distinguish between each kind.
And it might seem
The
like a small
understanding
difference,
oppression
but
is
it's
the
very
first step
important to
to
be able to
fighting.
distinguish between each
Let's start with
kind.
the core is
This
versus
understanding
any form of
oppression is the first step to
ideology.
fighting it.
Every system of
Let's start with
oppression
the
comes
core
from
at the heart of
ideology.
every form of
Because it's
oppression,
not how better than
ideology.
another.
Every system
Ideological
of
oppression
oppression
starts
comes from
with
the
a
idea
dominant
that
group
one group
associated
is
with
somehow
positive
better
qualities
than
with
another.
itself and
Ideological
negative
oppression
qualities with the
starts with a
marginalized
dominant
or
group
positive
associates
group.
positive qualities with
Ideological
itself
oppression
and
describes the
negative
deeply
qualities with the
ingrained
marginalized
social
or
roots that they
other
follow.
group.
It's the larger
Ideological
overarching
oppression describes
idea
the
that needs to be
deeply ingrained
isms.
social
For example,
roots
the
that they
idea
follow.
that
It's the
black people
larger
are dangerous
overarching
is
idea that
ideological
needs to be
racism.
isms.
The
For
idea that
example,
poor
the
people are
idea
lazy
that
is
black people are
ideological
dangerous
pleasant.
is ideological
Ideological oppression
racism.
leads
The
to
idea that poor people
institutional
are lazy
oppression.
is ideological
Institutional
classism.
oppression is the way that
Ideological
systems
oppression
and
leads to
institutions
institutional
manifest the
oppression.
dominant ideology.
Institutional oppression is the way
Institutions
that
control
systems and
access.
institutions
Who is able to get
manifest
to
the
what and
dominant
how.
ideology.
This includes legal rights,
Institutions
police
control
practice,
access.
access to
Who
medical
is
care and
able to get to what
education,
and
public
how?
policy,
This includes
political
legal
power,
rights,
and
police
media
practice,
representation.
access to
For
medical care and
example, when women
education,
make
public
2/3 of what
policy,
men
political
make,
power,
that's
and media
institutional
representation.
sexism.
For
When a
example,
building is
when women
constructed
make
without
2/3 of
wheelchair
what
ramps,
men
that's
make, that's
institutional
institutional
ableism.
sexism.
All of this
When a
leads to
building is constructed
interpersonal
without
oppression.
wheelchair ramps, that's
Interpersonal oppression
institutional
is probably the
ableism.
easiest
All
to
of this
recognize
leads
because
to
it happens all
interpersonal
around
oppression.
us. Interpersonal
Interpersonal
oppression is the
oppression is
way that
probably the
people play
easiest
out
to recognize
discrimination
because
and
it
violence
happens
while
all
they do.
around us. Interpersonal oppression is the way that people play out discrimination and violence on each other. It can take the form of microaggressions, jokes, stereotypes, and harassment. For example, when a student is bullied for being gay, it's interpersonal homophobia. When a Muslim person is told that they're a terrorist, it's interpersonal Islamophobia. And all those forces, ideological, institutional, and interpersonal, lead to internalized oppression. Internalized oppression is the way that people with marginalized identities internalize narratives of their own inferiority. It's what leads people to feel less than. This is the end goal of oppression. The oppressive party doesn't need to exert force any longer because the marginalized group is enacting oppression on itself to maintain the status quo. It's important to remember that it's never a marginalized person's fault that they feel internalized oppression. It's simply what happens when someone faces negative stereotypes, low expectations, and ongoing discrimination. So, for example, an immigrant feeling embarrassed about having an accent is internalized xenophobia. When a trans woman feels that they can never be a real woman, that's internalized transphobia. So, to review, the 4 I's of oppression are ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. Each of these types are interconnected and completely supported by the others. They can never exist on their own and can even be seen as a cycle. Now that you understand the different kinds of oppression, you're even more equipped to fight it. Don't forget that any effort to dismantle oppression should aim to address it at all 4 of these levels. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so what's the one that is a huge thought? It's a huge thought that something or someone is better than someone else. Just like one on our table. Which one? Ideological, it's an idea, right? Ideological. Which one is the one where it embeds itself within our systems, our structures, our organization? Institutional. Which one is the one that we relate with each other? Interpersonal. And which ones are the ones where the message of inferiority or the message of superiority embeds itself into our own bodies, minds, and is internalized? Okay, so when we're talking about this as a spiritual practice, then we're talking about we need to be paying attention to all 4 of these. They always work together. It doesn't work if it's not all working. And so as we're thinking about this as our topic being, how do we embed anti-racism into our life as a spiritual practice, or when you talk about transformation, I really appreciate that word. And part of it is because I appreciate that because spiritual practice, when we have a spiritual practice, I might do one thing and then I kind of get tired of that one thing, so I'm going to do something else. And this is not optional. We cannot be deciding, oh, maybe not, I'm going to move out of the anti-racism thing. I think I'll move on to something else. Actually, so today I'm going to suggest that we look at it even more so as a rule of life, which I know that most of you are familiar with that, what the rule of life means. So I'm going to share these resources with you. And again, there's them. Okay. That's what I've come to do, is show you a whole bunch of resources because I really don't know where everyone is. But here's a resource from the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. This is talking about, as a white person, the role for people who are white is different than it is for people of color. But I was going to have you all say, I am a racist. I was going to have you all say that, but I'm like, no, because there's people of color in the room. The difference is power. Does the power structure work in your favor or not, is the difference between races and then having this white supremacy culture, the ways of doing things that are determined to be the right ways of doing things. We all have that. If you've been raised in the United States, you definitely have that. But if you've been raised on this planet, you've got it to some degree because colonization and white supremacy was spread throughout the entire world. And it is driving throughout the entire world. As a matter of fact, my son said, Mom, look at this chart, and it shows when does the Independence Day happen? All over the world, what date is the Independence Day? From all of these countries, all over the world. It's like the most celebrated thing in the world, literally, that we all pretty much have in common, was when was the independence, for some it hasn't even happened yet, but when was their independence from a European country that had come in and colonized? That's amazing to think about, really, right? So the colonization of our minds has happened all around the world. We're talking about this one unique brand, which is here on this particular continent, right? So that's the one we're talking about right now. So as a white person here in this United States, you have particular work to be doing. And this is some materials around that. And then for people of color, becoming an anti-racist as a person of color, we are also impacted by this system of racism. So we cannot say, well, I hear this all the time. I'm a person of color. I don't have to be doing this stuff. I don't have to study this. I don't have to. Unfortunately, we do because we have the colonized mindset in us also. And we can be working in an organization where white supremacy culture is running strong and there can be no white people on the staff, none. And we're still like beholden to the thing because the thing has power and control of all of our systems. And so like, that's why I was gonna have you all say, I'm a racist, but it's different, okay? It's really a different thing to have a person of color say I'm a racist than it is to have a white person say that. And everything I say today, you don't have to agree with anything I say here today. No, I ask that you go do a little bit of just like research and study. That's why I'm gonna give you all the things, because you don't have to agree with me at all. And I really mean that. So it is embedded in our lives. And so that's what this document is. It's kind of an exploration of what's the work, because it is work that we all need to be doing. So that's what that document is for. This one is about developing a rule of life. And this is 7 core principles of a rule, which I know a lot of you are very familiar with. The reason I'm handing you this one, it's a very tangible document that you can share with other people. If you were to be talking about this with people who may or may not, you know, they could have a spirituality as a background, but they may not understand necessarily what is a rule of life. Like a lot of us in this room know what that means. But I want to suggest that this be rule of life work, not just spiritual practice work. Because when you add this to your rule of life, you do this whether you want to do it or not. You do, it doesn't change with the season. It doesn't change whether you're tired of it or not. Rule of life is like, we do it. It is, you know, like I have my personal rule of life. I don't give people money ever, like walking in the street and I just don't, because I don't even know how to decide it. Maybe I don't have it. My rule of life is food. And the reason why my rule of life is whenever I see someone people who are, along the streets, so I'm moving along. It might be very inconvenient, but if you need food, I will go get that for you. Even if I'm on the way to a meeting and that is really inconvenient because I'm like, I'm running late and I have to go do this thing because that is my own rule, right? So y'all know what rule of life is. And this is just helpful because on this particular one is, here's the 7 things on this. These are the 7 core practices for this particular rule. Silence and solitude, scripture, prayer, fasting, simplicity, living in community, and Sabbath. Where is anti-racism in that for you? And then it's a little chart. That's what I gave you, is these 2 pieces, but it's a longer document. Okay? Be with Jesus, become like Jesus, do what Jesus did. Here are the practices: abiding, mind, body, relationships, rest, work and money, God's hospitality, and then it talks about daily, monthly, all these things. Where is anti-racism in that for you? You will put it there, and then it will need to be there all the time. And then you will need to figure out, how is that a part of my life all of the time, even when it's inconvenient? So that is just another resource of looking at it. These are 4 spiritual practices. Need a copy of this one. Okay, so claiming your own story. What is your story? Who are your people? Who are your ancestors? Where are they from? What land are they on? Whose land was that before they got there? Claiming your story and claiming it courageously. Because when we go and we claim our story, sometimes we find things that we really wish were not there. And that's part of the story. And so boldly and bravely claiming your story, getting to know about who your people are, where are they? I'm trying to remember, I don't want to say this without remembering who it was that said it, but where are your grandmothers from? Where are their people? I'm sorry, I just wish I could tell you right now who said that, but where are your grandmothers from? Knowing everything you can find out about those places. And like, even if you're like, well, my grandmothers are all in Ireland or wherever they are. Okay, well, who are your people that are here on this chunk of this continent, and learning about that land? Even if someone immigrated here, okay, then where were they? What was the town? What was the city? What do you know about that place? Learning about where are your grandmothers from. Learning and relearning. I would also suggest unlearning history is another piece to this. We've been taught a whole bunch of history that's not true. We've been told certain pieces of history that either are not true or that just are just deplete of any real information. Laying all burdens and emotions before God. And they talked about this, Reverend D'Angelo talked about it, about this is painful, and he called it a cancer. This is painful work, and it's excavating work, and it's digging down deep, and it is not all comfortable work. And we definitely, that's what we need to be praying for, is praying for us on the journey. And then practicing discernment and self-care. And I would say for people, the closer we are to dominant culture, the less self-care I think you should be doing during this work. Because when people are like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I heard that a lot after George Floyd was murdered, people that were out and about on the streets. And I'm all, you've been involved in this for 6 months. Like, sometimes you can do that. But your rule of life, does your rule of life say, and then take a break on the days when you're tired? Rule of life doesn't say that, right? Rule of life says, okay, that's great. I'm sorry that you're tired. Keep going and keep going. Because we don't not pray 5 days a week. 5 times a day just because you're tired. You do the rule. I'll give this one to you. This is just a racial identity status self-assessment tool. You will be receiving this, but it kind of just gives you some look into all about your race. When white people do this, the people I know who are deeply involved in this practice, they're kind of like, okay, I try to learn about all that I can about my race. I feel a sense of pride about my race. That's a hard one. At this moment in time, I have had several people who are white say, that was a hard one for me to check. This whole movement is not asking you, as anyone in here who's white, not asking you to not feel proud. There's lots to feel proud of. There's lots to not feel proud of. But This is about whiteness, though. This is a deep dig into what does it mean to be white in the United States. A lot of times when we're talking about race, people think, focus on people of color. I want to know about people of color. I want to know more about their lives. I want to be able to talk to my colleagues who are people of color more about race. Why do you want to talk to me about race if you're not going to talk to Alice over here who's white about race? Like what's the focus? It's that part of the history that we didn't learn, right? Is that race is a white people thing. So if white people are not talking about race, then we've got a problem. We don't necessarily need for you to talk to us about race. We need for you to talk to yourself about it and then to each other about it. And that does not mean that we're not part of the conversation. So this is another assessment tool. If anyone is uncomfortable, like what I'm saying, these are just kind of like factual things. And where you are in your journey, this, like she said, like, I don't feel bad about it. I was raised in this thing and I just don't feel guilt about it because it just is what it is. So the sooner you can just be like, okay, yeah, white people created this system. I didn't create the system, but white people created a system. It could have been any system. And this is the one we chose. We racialized. And it goes back to slavery. Just point blank, there's no other way that I can explain it. And so we racialized it, but then as soon as we kind of got out of that, we dropped it in somewhere else. As soon as we got out of that thing, as we were doing the Reconstruction, we dropped in racism. We didn't have to, but we did. As soon as we got out of that, then we dropped in redlining. We didn't have to, but we did. Then as soon as we got out of that, we dropped in, and all of these things, y'all didn't do it, you didn't make it up. But we have to pay attention because, like it said, oppression happens in 4 different ways. And it just keeps going. And like Robert DiAngelo said, so you're not racist. Okay, when did you get rid of that? When did you have the surgery? Tell me when it was. Right? It's just like, well, I'm Christian and Verna does here. She goes, wow, really? Like, when did it happen? Because like, I'm still trying. Right? It's the same kind of a concept. You couldn't get rid of this unless you have done some serious work to get rid of it. We all have it. We have it. It's not really even a debatable thing. It's just not debatable, right? So if we can just start there, it's such an easier thing to do, right? Because then we just get to work. We can just step in and be like, yeah, I have this, they called it a cancer and you also called it that. I have this thing. We've been given this thing long before we ever even knew there was a thing to be given. And if we can just acknowledge that, yeah, we were big. And as soon as we arrived, I've had people who are immigrants say, I knew when I got to the United States that Black people were the people to stay away from. Even Black people have been told that, right? Like somewhere that message is being given. Most people probably can't even identify where it was, when it was that someone, but when you arrive, I have had immigrants tell me, like when I got here, that was, the message was told to me. I don't even know how I knew it. I don't even know where it came from necessarily. So it's there and we can pretend like it's not there, or we can just know that it truly is there. It's not real, but it's there. And then when we know that, we can just go, okay, well, then I need to do some work to dispel the anti-Blackness that's inside of my head. So this is a summary of the stages of racial identity development. This is kind of like when we start to realize, wait, there's this dominant culture and I don't fit in. And when you look at this document, it's, so this shows for people of color, these are theories by people who study. These are academic, what you call that, like theories, and people who have studied all of them. They have studied how do people of color come to know themselves as people of color, process. How do biracial people come to understand themselves as biracial? How do white people, how and when, and like there are certain things, markers, as they study up and study this, that they notice there are certain things that happen to us. And then there's an integrated model. There's another one for people who are different ethnicities. So these are things that we could almost predict. I could sit and interview you. I could interview every one of you and we would see this pattern if we just sat and did an interview. Okay, so this explains it. And there's other documents, and I can give you those too, but there's one specifically for people of all different races. So this stuff can, like I said, we can basically write books on it because we go pattern things that happen to us. So we're not also unique in that, right? So this is just another tool for you to take a look. Very much the video. And then this one, which is a cycle of liberation. Cycle of socialization was the first one that I gave to you at the very beginning, talking about why do we believe the things that are told to us. Cycle of oppression was the second one. And then this is the cycle of liberation, and that got run off sideways. So the top of it's been cut off, but at the cycle of socialization, there is a point at which we wake up. Something happens. Session, read the session. I doubt it because a lot of you are already doing work in this area. But there's a time when you realize, okay, wait, something's not right. Something's not right. And at that point is when we have cognitive dissonance. So-and-so said that, and you can think back to the different messaging that you received around different things and different races and all of this stuff. I think George Floyd's murder was a huge way for a lot of people. A critical incident happened that created cognitive dissonance for a lot of people. And then this process starts. It breaks the cycle of socialization. It offers a new way. It offers new ways of thinking about things. It says that I can be part of the liberation. I can be a part of this work. And then that's what this cycle is, the cycle of liberation. So as a part of your rule of life, like again, for me, I think of it as part of a rule of life as opposed to part of spiritual practice. Because I think like there were times in my life where I walked labyrinths like all the time, because for whatever reason, that is definitely where I experienced God was doing that practice. There have been times where I've done like contemplative prayer, and I did that really regularly. And then there were times where and so like, if I look at it like that, it's kind of like, it's an optional, where do I see God right now? And I think anti-racism as a part of your rule of life says it doesn't get removed. It doesn't change, even if you're not feeling it. Even when you're not like, oh, this is something I want to be doing right now. Even if you're like, I don't see God in this at all. God, I don't see you. And then you continue on with it. And I said, and I think it's something that we all need to be doing. And again, I think it's something different for people who are white than for people who are people of color, because there's a power differential. We are proximate to the power systems, even if you don't think you are in a place of power. Anyone in particular who is white or light or proximate to lightness, we have a worldwide preference for lightness, which is connected to the worldwide preference for whiteness. And so how proximate you are to that affords you things. So for me as a Black person, it is a very interesting thing happening right now. 1970s, I mean, I come from, my dad's from Charleston. So I am the result of a very ugly part of us. I am one of the mulattoes. So I'm not like of a biracial family. I am descendant of multiple marriages of mulatto people. Okay, and I say that because in the 1970s, 1% of the Black people in the United States, 99% of us were Black Americans, 1% of us were immigrants. Right now, 10% of us are immigrants, so only 90%. That's a big difference. And what's happening for us in the Black community is, whether thinking about it or not, is that saying based on the color of your skin, that wasn't a thing. It didn't matter the color of your skin, you were still Black, because it was a law, right? It used to be a law that you were, because we were labor. So I am the product of, unfortunately, I'm the product of rape, right? Because of that, okay, well, that's not the case anymore. And so now it is based on the color of your skin. And that is a difference though, because some of the people do not understand necessarily the history of Black Americans, which is different from the history of people coming from other places. And so things are changing in our community. And a lot of, I don't even know if people are really thinking about that, but the lightness and the darkness, colorism's always been a thing, but it's a different thing when you have people who are darker, who don't actually have this story. So for us, for just people of color at all in general, it is a different practice that we are doing than for people who are white, but we all need to be on the journey of this practice, because this thing doesn't go away, and we're all steeped in it. We're all like just baking in it. And until we do go get the surgery and sit in groups and talk about it and create systemic changes. Just if we get along better, that's not enough. We could all spend hours and hours and hours and hours on changing us, but that's not enough because that does not change systems. So we each need to look at what is our what is it, your power, your sphere of influence, and think about, well, where else do I take this work? And how does it impact in all 4 parts of those 4 that are on your paper? How do I create change in all 4 of those ways? Stop.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. That's magnificent. I have more of a comment than a question. I wish your presentation could be issued in a courtroom in Fulton County, Georgia today when all of this is going on. People need to hear exactly what you're saying.
I haven't been watching today, but I was telling you all that I met Fonnie when Fonnie was born, because Fonnie's grandparents lived on my street, Enmark, Dominguez Hills. One of my friends, Tracy, that's her niece, actually. So, yeah. We said, please tell her all the aunties are like sending her all the love.
The last part of your presentation, which you just finished saying about going out, I think it's very important for us to know that we have to do the first hard part of looking at ourselves and not rush to, well, I'm going to go out and change the world when we haven't started by changing ourselves, because then we can't see really that what it is that we need to change. And along with what you gave us, I also think it's good to have a nice, for those of us that are Catholic, a very beautiful and old practice taught to us in the Baltimore Catechism called an examination of conscience, which we're supposed to do every day.
Right, daily examine. I would agree with that. I think sometimes people think that being an ally, that I want to be your ally, and actually most people don't really know how to be an ally. Like I don't need you to be my ally. I need for you to be, well, first of all, for people who are white. And again, I started something called My Work to Do. So if there's anyone white who's looking for something to do, it's literally an online practice. It's been on since 2018. And it is groups that come together and process these topics. People who are white and people of color who see themselves as allies to white people. And I call white people into the work of being allies to other white people, because you don't actually know what I need. You have not lived enough in a life that as a person of color is like to even know what we need. So that's why I say, why would you have a conversation with me before you'd have a conversation with Alice, this very made up white colleague, right? So I agree with you. I think we need to really do the work ourselves before we can think we're stepping in to do the work for someone else. We really all need to understand whiteness better. How does it work? And so for some people, it's really examining that and how it's working in our own lives to understand how you could possibly be an ally. That is deep work that you're talking about. Yeah.
Did have a question. I'm just curious about it because I'm looking at it from the standpoint of how racism is so woven into the fabric of our society. And I know you just mentioned that it started individually with us. I do have a question, and it's I don't know if it's even possible to reach the state, but do you think that in our lifetime that we will be able to see that type of unity and change, starting with individual self first and then overall as a society?
Yeah, thanks. I don't know that I'm the expert to answer that question, but I think about that a lot. So it's, when you said it starts with us, I think the change starts with us, but the process starts outside. The process starts with an ideology. This is what's given to us. It's a real decision. When we constructed the United States of America, when this group of entities, people came here, they made a decision about what the structure was going to be. And the structure chosen, so that was chosen for us. We did not, that comes from outside and it comes from greed. The structure we have was designed to serve only certain people. And that is like just factually, again, you don't have to agree with me, but that structure, and it's still running. So it is a massive effort, actually, but the change comes from within. The thing for me that is scary, where I don't know how to answer that question, is because we can't trust ourselves. As a country, we can't trust ourselves. Not individually, we can't, but as a country. So we had laws, and civil rights put laws in place, basically acknowledged we can't trust ourselves. So we're going to build laws that can systemically change things, right? And that are going to hold the structure from prevailing. It's going to now create a kind of slightly new structure, slightly, right? But those laws have to be re-signed. Those laws don't stay in place. They have to actually be re-signed over time. And what's scary right now is that when Obama became president, no matter what anybody thinks about that, about Obama being president, when Obama became president, the people who knew that they did not want those structures in place, it was like, wow, look, we did it. We're all good. We're good. We got it all figured out. We don't need this anymore. Let's not re-sign them. And they were protecting us from us. They were protecting us from the mess that we were in. But those times, they have timed out and they have not been re-signed. And so to me, that is that's scary, because that's some of what we're seeing right now. We had made progress, but that's not really who we are. We need those laws to protect us from us. And so that is kind of, I think, what we're living with right now. And I don't know the answer to that, because I'm not probably the most optimistic person about it right now. I want to say yes. But I think that's why it's really important for us to be civically involved right now. Yeah.
Well, in relation to your comment about institutional racism, some of us have been following the movie Doctrine of Discovery, which is really doctrine of domination. So institutionally, we need to change our history books to be true instead of false.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the problem is we're doing the opposite right now. So again, to the point of progress, right? And we are stepping back on the progress. And what happens too is, because those laws are not there, within there, this is wide open for some other laws to be made, which have been being done. In Florida right now, it is illegal to teach Black history. So yeah, we're changing the books, but we had finally at least gotten to the point where we're like, the books need to be changed, but changed for the better. We need to these stories into the history books, right? We had at least a point where we were saying it, and some of the history books had been changed, adding some things in. And even also with the electronic books, you could actually update books in real time, which is nice, right? Because one day it'll say the president blah blah, and someone new gets elected with the electronic book, they can change it in real time. The president now, so instead of being right. Well, we're in the reverse order. So to your point about the books, we are literally in the reverse. In Florida right now, the books are being changed. If you are a public institution, so that means from down, with the babies all the way up into college. If you were, like I work for the people concerned here, my job would be illegal because we receive state funding. So this lesson or this conversation right here would not be allowed. I teach at our new employee orientation every Monday. And I couldn't talk about some of these things at our new employee orientation because we receive state funding if we were in Florida. And you can't teach about it. So Rosa Parks is a woman. Rosa Parks was on a bus. They told Rosa to stand up. She said no. Rosa Parks is courageous. End of story. That's the telling of that story in Florida. No context, no boycott, no she's Black, no nothing. Rosa Parks is a courageous woman. That's it. So we're going backwards right now. And there's no laws to protect us from doing that.
taking into consideration that we're going backwards, perhaps then our protection would be to start fostering oral narratives, which is what kept our histories alive through our songs, through parents passing down histories, through communities sharing stories, because the oral narratives could not be stopped.
Yeah. I think we see some examples right now too, just on a worldwide level of getting rid of, when you're talking about these people, you get rid of their histories, you get rid of their art, their language, their materials, their cultural things, their cultural places, their museums, the collections, the places where those, so that's why the oral is really important. And in some ways, white supremacy culture actually does that too, right? It doesn't really revere those things the way that other cultures do, not the museums and stuff, but like the storytelling piece. It's not like white people don't tell stories. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying as a culture, this big thing, a lot of us, like indigenous people, they tell the story. Black people tell the story. Braiding, so there were stories and maps in the braids, all the things. So yes to that.
I want to push back just a little bit.
Sure.
Because I think all that we're seeing happening in Florida says something to how effective the doctrine of discovery is and learning about it. And I think the uproar that's happening right now is a natural response to the upset that's coming from the ground up in our system, saying, wait, this isn't right, this isn't fair. And if you look at college campuses and a lot of different places, even though they don't almost have facts, there is this desire to make change. I mean, how many, even indigenous people knew 5 years ago about the boarding schools? They didn't talk about them. I mean, it's talked about now. We understand who Abraham Lincoln was now. Very different from what we all knew a few years back.
Yeah,
it's out there.
Yeah, I think that some of that I think comes from social media. I think it's from sources of information that maybe we didn't have before. So yeah, I want to agree with you. And I want to say to anyone who thinks that this let's just say we were on a great trajectory. Let's say the stuff like with Florida and the absorption of those things was not happening. Let's say we were like, I know, and we're like on our way. So anytime we make progress, this is a really important thing to remember. Anytime non-white supremacy cultured things start to see progress, in my particular mindset, it's anytime Black people see progress is the way I would say that sentence. But it's really actually anytime not white supremacy culture starts to see progress, it will get burnt down. And you need to know that if you're on this path, that is a part of the thing itself. That is why Tulsa Massacre and all the others happened, because we actually were seeing great progress. And nothing had been given. We made that happen ourselves, right? So that is like, you have to know. So I appreciate you for bringing that up, Lo, is that anytime the not white supremacy culture starts, so even if, no matter what point we do start to really figure this out, please know, whether you are alive or not, please tell your grandchildren or your babies, whoever they are in your life, there will come a time that this is going to get ugly. Because if we start to figure it out, it will get burnt down. That thing is really fighting for its life right now. I would agree with that.
That's why we're all working so hard to build partnerships with one another, because the war is coming. Yeah, and that's what happens when you take on evil.
Sure. Yeah, I have to agree with that. That if it's now or in the future, at what point we decide we're turning this thing around, and we really are, the thing itself is really going to fight for its life. So yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Lo.
Thinking how to phrase this thought. I think there's, oh, closer, you can't hear. I think there's a more core drive connecting all the isms, which is, I believe, a belief that dominance and power will equal safety and success. And that belief will, if we continue to sustain it in our subconscious, we will continue to try to dominate other groups, no matter what the identity politics are playing in that specific moment. Because every country, every race and ethnicity has their dominance struggles happening. So if I go to Africa and they're all Black, there's going to be dominance struggles within those groups, and they're going to try to find differences that will create identity politics to then dominate the other groups, create more power, acquire more wealth, have more land, have more, whatever have more is required to feel safer and more prosperous. So I don't know where I'm going with
No,
this,
I
but
understand what you're saying.
I think that there's like a core problem
Yeah.
in ideology that then affects, and I think specialization is useful, but then if we get too lost in specialization, then we'll fix the surface, but we won't fix the core.
Yeah.
And then it'll burn down.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. Because you were talking about it burning down. It'll burn down if the core is maintained.
Yes. Yes, to everything you just said, yes. I'm trying to think of how I want to say my next sentence. Because I don't want to dismiss what you just said, but it kind of does. So, but it doesn't dismiss it as it not being true. So this is something to consider because both of these things are true at the same time. And it is absolutely something that we have, the wrestle on this is really deep. Can we use that as a reason to not acknowledge that here in the United States, we have a particular group of people and a collection of a few people who are proximate to that group. It's Indigenous and Black people in the United States. Indigenous and Black people have truly received different treatment in all systems. So that is true. And what you said is true. And it is true that Black people, Black American people, and now Black people, because sometimes people come from other places not realizing they don't know that you're not Black American. So I have friends who are here from Kenya, Episcopal priests, who said, we don't bring our boys anymore. We've stopped bringing them until they're ready for college because they start to go into depression. These are people who have never had depression as a trait in their family. The Black mortality rates for the women when they come from other countries where Black women come, they've never had issues before, it starts to track. In ways that it wasn't, they didn't have the thing when they were wherever they were, and then when they come to the United States, the women are starting to see the same infant mortality rates, the same rates, okay? So we have two things going on. One of them is the fact that we as people, so there's something maybe spiritual or whatever that is happening. So I want to just say yes to that. And we will all need to figure out how do we manage that being true. We are dominators. As a human species, is that what we do? It's funny because we just had a conversation, my 22-year-old son and I had this morning at breakfast. Is it something that's just, biblical in our scriptures, even that we do this? And we cannot let that be the reason why we don't do the work here to realize something different in real time. Because not everybody's on a spiritual journey, at least that they know of, right? Like not everybody claims that as a part of their life. So they're both true at the same time. And I want to appreciate what you said, because yes, it is something bigger and we dominate for whatever reason as humans, but I don't know that that's necessarily, stop. I just want to agree with you because I think we have evidence of that in records all over, you know what I mean? As we look at histories and what's the word I'm looking for? Archaeology and sociology, right? So I think there's lots of
lots to pack in here, unpack here. I think as I look at our world today and the conflicts, the racism, the institutions that are crumbling all over the world, I look at it as a call for transformation on every planet for every person. And I think that that God has a hand in this. It's time to stop this. And given the experience of Black people in this country, and given the leadership potential that the leadership that the United States exhibits or exerts, this is the opportunity in our country to take a lead on this and set a tone. I do worry in the wee hours of the morning that we're headed for a civil war, and don't really want that to come out of my mouth, but maybe that's what needs to happen to really transform and change the way we've been behaving since we were founded. And I don't mean to put a damper on this, but there's a reality check here that I think is, again, that goes to the spiritual core of how I see what's going on in the whole world, you know, is that we really need to come together and acknowledge this person to person, human to human. And I think that that's what our God wants us to do.
Oh, yeah, oh, sorry.
I think what you had spoken to about allyship was very important and very something that I guess has a lot of nuance. I think that, like we said early on, I think after the Floyd protests in 2020 was in a lot of younger people's lifetimes, one of the biggest, first, most important events where this conversation came about, I guess maybe since Rodney King and since the internet. But I saw a lot of, I think we all agree that on, say on social media, there's just so much noise, so much discourse that's sometimes productive, but sometimes so unproductive and goes around in loops. I saw a lot of people, for example, saying that people, I guess, who are trying to be good allies, throwing out a lot of less than sensible imperatives of sort, saying, for example, like, if your friend's parents are saying racist things, you should be lecturing them, or you should be scolding them. Your own parents, you should be lecturing them. If they don't listen, you should be abandoning them. I think I disagree with some of that. I think it's also a little silly. I think that ignores the process of anti-racism, and you know, it's so many people's, especially parents. You know, my parents are immigrants. They said really messed up things about Black people when I was a kid. It took a long time to understand why. And I was just wondering, maybe it's a big question, but what you have to say or what your approach is in, you know, what you teach about when it comes to determining the quote unquote worth of, on your part, of making the effort to explain, to have conversations with people who are resistant maybe to changing racism, and also determining their capacity to.
I'm like, oh, I have an answer to that question. I started my work to do for this reason, basically what you're saying. So I care about your parents, right? I also care for you to have a place to go to find the answer to that question. So I care about the Black people in my life. I just happen to be that, you know, it's kind of a joke almost, right? Like I'm that Black friend who does talk about this stuff all the time. That's just because I happen to be her. And I know lots of people in my life are like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want you to ask me about this. I don't want to Google it. But I don't find that to be a very helpful answer, right? Abandon your parents. I didn't find that to be a very helpful answer, but I needed the answer for me. Like, and that's why it's called my work to do. I know you probably think I'm saying, come to my work to do because you got a lot of work to do, and now you can call it my work to do too. No, mine is me, Suzanne. This is my work to do. I create spaces primarily for white people because that is the group of people that I look around in my life and go, You guys really don't understand. Like you really don't. Oh my God. What am I gonna do? What are my people gonna do? Because you're the ones that are in control. But I don't know where to tell you to go. I'm not saying that in a mean way, but like, I don't know what to do. So I created it because I wanted to invest more into that rather than abandoning, because I couldn't see how abandoning was gonna help anything. And so I think for each of us, that's what this is a spiritual practice, this as a rule of life, that's what that call is. What is yours to do? It's something. There's no way we can get out of this if every single one of us is not doing something. So what is it? What is it? Like, is the solution for you to abandon your parents? I don't think so, but maybe, like for some people, it might be because you're spending all of your time caring for helping them to see it and they don't, then go spend that time somewhere else. And maybe on this topic, abandon your parents, don't abandon your parents, you know what I mean? But like, what is yours? What is your spiritual practice? Where is anti-racism in your spiritual practice? Where is anti-racism in your rule of life? It needs to be there, we know that for sure. That's not me saying that. I think our God would comfortably say it needs to be somewhere. And it needs to be regular, and it needs to be something that you are putting time and effort into, even, you know what I mean? I think that's, for me, yeah. So I would invite each of you to discernment. What is it for you?
Thank you. There's also one more. Okay. Okay, so someone on Zoom asks, how do you see Palestinian liberation as connected with Black liberation and all POC liberation?
Yeah, I don't know this group, so it's hard for me because I have lots of thoughts on all of this, but I will say, I do think I really believe there's a racial component. I've really tried hard. Before all of this started, I was asking my friend, I have a friend who's from Israel, and I said I have several Jewish friends who are telling me that I'm being anti-Semitic when I say that I don't understand what's happening with people in Palestine. This was a couple of years ago. Can you help me? Can you talk to me about it? So that is part of my practice. Can you help me? Can you talk to me about it? It's to go and ask questions of the people who I think are connected to views on it, right? So can you help me to understand? Can you teach me whatever? And my friend whose family is in Israel, he is from Israel and his family is from there, but he lives in Atlanta now. He lived in Inglewood at the time. He said it is not anti-Semitic to say that you care about the lives of people who are Palestinian. That is not anti-Semitic. And so I tried to then find, are there other voices who will also share that with me? Because I don't think I'm being wrong saying that I care about that. And then I also think that there is a racial component to this, and it's a tricky little thing because people who are Jewish have been racialized. Here in the United States, they are considered white, most of them, because there's people who are Latino and Jewish, people who are like dark-skinned Black people who are Jewish. So, but for the most part, it's most of the people who are at least white presenting are considered white, but they do know in a way that others don't know what racialization. It is a process. It is a real made up thing. So it is a real process that we do. And the Nazis came here to learn it and then took it back. And they actually said some of that stuff that's going on in the United States, that anti-Black stuff, it's too horrible. We won't do it. Like that is literally what they came when they left the United States. They said, some of it is so bad, we're not going to do these things. So anyway, so for me, I look at it and I see that there is something racial going on. I'm not trying to like offend people, but I also think that we need to speak up. Like we just need to see it, that there really is something that is connected to this here. What happened here? There are some things happening there that are connected.
That was the last Zoom.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
what I'd like to share is not so much a question, but more a statement. First of all, to thank you for the richness of all that you've brought here today. So much to be with. As a grandmother, as an elder, as a crone, I'd like to bring a note of optimism. To speak to what the gentleman asked about whether in our lifetime we would see a different day. And then to speak to what you spoke of, the reality of the fact that as we make advances, there's always tremendous pushback. But as a person who has spent many years in the pools of death and dying, I want us to remember the cycle of life. And that with all life, with all systems, death does come, dying does come. And what you speak about with the ramifications and retaliations, I've always equated that to what we see in death and dying and what we call terminal delirium. In that time of having the breathing, the pushing, the beating, the screaming, the cursing, all that can happen, those are just symptoms of what you said, that energy that does not want to give up its life. But I want us to remember that with all life, death does come. And that one day, these systemic systems of racism will breathe their last.
I know that we've come to a very long, beautiful session, and I will let Sherry finish out the presentation, but I did want to turn back to our dear Rosa. She has a couple announcements about activities that people can do now, and I'm sure Suzanne will be sharing with us. We'll copy all the curriculum and send everybody links, and also find out where there are active places that she would like us to sign up or activate. But I want to turn it back over to Rosa before Sherry closes.
Thank you for bringing anti-racism to us. That was wonderful. Thank you for what you said, because it's tiring sometimes talking about anti-racism to groups that I love that are all white and that are in institutions. I include the Immaculate Heart community as one of them. Because what Jacqueline said about the fear that it's going to go away is so deep. And it's like, okay, I hear what happened to Martin Luther King in that Birmingham jail, scolding those preachers who are telling him stop. And I hear Harriet Tubman telling those abolitionists, I am going back as long as one enslaved person is left. I will not stop. Because sometimes I found in these groups, not just my community, but in others that I work, that those whose hearts bleed the most are the ones that uphold these hostile, oppressive institutions the most. And I get tired. But thank you, because it reminds me, yes, they'll die too. Dia de los Muertos is the message, you'll die too. Close by, we have neighbors, Methodist Church of Echo Park. And there are buses that have been coming almost every month, maybe more than once a month, bringing people from Texas. And it's a long ride, and the Methodist Church is a welcoming center. So far, the community, thanks to Lenore, has been providing toys for the children. Through CLU, my spiritual director in CLU has asked, is it possible to have a little bit more help? People who may want to volunteer to greet these people, because it's been that congregation of about 60 people in that church that have been showing up at all hours, 3 a.m. in the morning, at all hours to greet them, and they're getting tired. They need more volunteers to greet these people. And this is just a stop for many of them. For many of them, they still have more of a journey. So if you are interested, if you know a group that is interested, If you know someone who is interested, maybe you have a high schooler, you know, a high schooler that has to do volunteer time. This is great, they can do volunteer time. This will be over at the table. And if you would please just name, phone number, email, because I'm going to start collecting this. This isn't the last time that I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to bring it up again, sharing to the community. If we can get some volunteers, and it doesn't have to be us. You know, I hear people all the time, I am so tired, I can barely walk. Yes, you know somebody. You know somebody who can do this. Okay, so please, I appreciate it.
I don't have words to thank you. You just have articulated so many issues on such a deep level with humor and kindness. And I hope everybody here today really appreciates what Suzanne has done. And I ask you, what will you do differently after being here today? You know, I reminded you, we're here to educate ourselves, and Suzanne's provided so much information to us. And yes, we want you to pray about it, but you need to start acting. And so will you make this a rule of your life? You know, is that something that you're going to take on going forward from this? Are you part of the target group or the non-target group? And if you're in the non-target group, consider that you're like a fish in water. You're so immersed in white supremacy that we don't even know it. We can't even see it. And we do need to have real due diligence on a regular basis to help us understand really what's going on and unlearn a lot of what we've been taught. So that's the call that I see today, to really make anti-racism as part of your regular lifestyle and what you do on a daily basis. Person to person, on our institutions. So get busy, okay? I want to give Suzanne a gift here, and let me just put the mic down for him. So this is a poster from our beloved Rita Kent. It's a quote from Camus that says, "I should like to be able to love my country and still love justice." So. And I have one more thing to say today, and I hope this is appropriate. I noticed that Mark Ridley Thomas came in, and we're welcoming you here today, Mark. And I want to just indulge a minute of my a personal story with Mark, and there's no way you will remember this, but in my former life, I worked in the Student Health and Human Services Division of Los Angeles Unified School District. And we were partnering with the California Endowment, who had done a study that identified various factors which were negatively impacting student achievement. One of which was access to healthcare. And so they had identified corridors in our city, most of which were in South Central. And because of systemic racism, had left those areas void, totally void of healthcare professionals and services. So when we were working to set up school-based health clinics, is what we were trying to do, to serve the needs of our students, their families in those neighborhoods. And several of our schools just didn't have enough space, or didn't have the right kind of space. And Mark was critical in helping us find locations, and not only find them, but to secure them. So you were there as we were starting the conversation. You were there as we opened the doors and celebrated. I think we opened a dozen school-based health clinics during that time. So I'm really happy that you're here today, and I want to thank you. Thank you for your years of service. And Mark, thank you for your help for our students in our city. So thank you. And on that note, I think it's a wrap. So I think there's still some sandwiches, take them to go, and hopefully we'll see you next month. Thank you for coming.